1984. Good year. Year Brad Garoon was born.
It was the year I was born, and it's 2023 is the year that I went to IMAX in New York City and saw an early screening of Stop Making Sense, which was pretty cool. Let's talk about it. Why'd you assign me this bombastic concert film?
Because it's so bombastic. I couldn't not assign it to you. I knew they were doing the 40th anniversary screenings, and I mean, I love this movie. I love the Talking Heads. We listen to them somewhat frequently in my house. It's a band my wife, my kid, and I all kind of like. To different degrees, of course. My kid only knows a couple of their songs, but she likes them a lot. And, we like David Byrne. And it's just, it's one of the greatest concert movies I've, ever. The music is great. It's a very uplifting, it's impossible not to feel good during and after this movie. So, and once I saw you'd not seen it, there was no other film I could have chosen for this year.
So I enjoyed it a great deal, and against all odds, kind of, because I got to the theater, I had a headache. As I saw it on a Monday. First off, I saw it on September 11th. That doesn't mean anything. It didn't affect my mood. But I did have a headache, as I do almost every Monday. Getting back to work, staring at a screen for 8 hours at the beginning of the week after I haven't really done that over the weekend. I always end up with a tension headache. I get to the theater, and I'm a little bit annoyed that I'm seeing it by myself because no one that I knew wanted to see it with me. I think in large part, some people said they weren't really Talking Heads fans. Annie had work stuff. So I was annoyed that I was seeing it by myself because it's a concert movie. I wanted to bop with someone. Mm-hmm. But then I got there, and the guy sitting next to me on my right was by himself. And then the guy who showed up sitting next to me on my left was by himself. But therein lied another problem. The guy sitting next to me on my left smelled real bad. This never happens. I never end up sitting next to stinky people at the theater. And this guy was like, it was just like garlic and BO. Overwhelming. Yeah. Luckily, I had a lot of popcorn. So I just sort of jammed that in my face, and it helped with the smell. And then also, luckily, the movie is immediately gripping. It starts with David Byrne coming out by himself, putting a radio down on the floor and saying, "I want to play something for you." And then it's not really anything playing on the radio, but the first song begins. And as the movie goes on, more and more of his bandmates come out. And it's such a cool way to start a show. And that's the first 30 minutes of this 90-minute movie. More and more folks come out until there's a small army of musicians on the stage doing really cool stuff. And the movie has not just Talking Head songs, but also songs from David Byrne's solo career. It has a Tom Tom Club song, which is one of the highlights. I'd never heard that song before. I didn't know that Mariah Carey was covering that song when she made Fantasy. That is neat. Yep. I loved it. And then it's got the stuff about Stop Making Sense, if you know anything about Stop Making Sense, which is basically Byrne running a marathon while he's doing these. And now it's spliced together from 3 shows. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can tell, but most of the time you can't. There's literally parts of this movie where he's running laps around the stage. And this guy must have been in the greatest shape of any musician. Incredible. What an endurance monster. He is the Akira Tozawa.
Stamina monster.
So that's happening. You've got the giant suit, which is based on, I think, Japanese theater, which is very cool. Mm-hmm. It's an image that stays with you. And it's every classic Talking Head song from 1984 going back to the 70s. I have no complaints about this film. It was terrific. There were women really like thrashing out dancing in my screening. Mm-hmm. And I'm not like, we've been to a lot of wrestling shows together. Mostly you and I at wrestling shows, we sit and we watch, and you and I are not like big, like, oh my God, we're not like throwing everything in, unless it's Samoa Joe versus CM Punk the first time they went to an hour draw. That's like the only time I can think of when you and I like really lost our minds. Sort of when we went to that show in New York in 2019 with Kevin Ford, we were enthusiastic because what a great show. Yeah. But by and large, we're like kind of the sit with our arms crossed and like nod and enjoy type people.
Yeah, smile. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm like bopping and moving and grooving in my chair. It was good.
How can you not bop around when David Byrne's doing his weird little knee dance movies? I'm trying to imitate it with my hands right now, but yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
This is an audio podcast. People can't see what you're doing. It's sort of like it's like a more organized inflatable car dealership tube.
There we go. Yeah,
thing. That's great. The way he dances with that lamp is great. The way he can like bend his body back in a way that doesn't seem possible is really great. He's an incredible showman. I imagine you've seen American Utopia. You haven't seen it.
I haven't seen American Utopia. There's a good reason for that, and the reason is that there's a good friend of mine, who I've seen a lot of concerts with. Actually, I've seen a couple concerts with him in the last year. We've seen Ryan Adams together. We saw Elvis Costello together. We saw Wilco together. All like that stuff. And we've been trying to get together to watch American Utopia together because he's a big Heads fan too. And it's at the point now where I probably should just watch it. Like, where if it hasn't happened yet, like, I should just watch it. But that was the idea, is that we were going to watch it together. So that's the only reason.
Okay, watch, because you also like Spike Lee.
I do like Spike Lee. Yeah, of course.
Huh. I thought we would talk about American Utopia. Anyway, American Utopia is also very good.
And I've seen a couple of I've watched clips from it. Like, I saw when he did it on Saturday Night Live, I saw a couple of those clips, and I watched them a little bit obsessively for like a week or two after they happened. It's like, oh, this is so cool. And that's when I was really hype about American Utopia. And I watched a lot of the clips from the Broadway show. But yeah, I never got to watch the movie because I've been waiting for. So, and I know Bob actually listens to this too. Bob is one of our devoted listeners. So Bob, let's get together and watch American Utopia.
Bob, you have single-handedly made this episode of this podcast slightly worse by not having watched American Utopia with Jacob. What about True Stories? Have you seen True Stories?
I have not seen True Stories.
So I've also not seen True Stories, but I was hoping you had so I could get your opinion on it. But David Byrne has made now at least 3 musical movies, and by all accounts, they're terrific.
Mm-hmm.
What are some other concert movies you do like?
Well, another one that I recently revisited when Robbie Robertson passed away, who was one of the singers in the band, I went back and watched The Last Waltz again. And The Last Waltz, for me, I said earlier that Stop Making Sense is the second greatest concert film ever. For me, The Last Waltz is the greatest, a band that I'm just a little bit more into than the Talking Heads, and they're a little bit more similar to some of the other bands I like. Like, some of the Last Waltz was like a big celebration of, this is like, okay, this is the last concert the band is ever going to play. And that was the whole idea behind it. And they've got a lot of special guests are there, like Joni Mitchell is there. Bob Dylan plays with them. Neil Young is out there. Van Morrison's out there. It's really great. And then they've got something Stop Making Sense didn't have. There's interstitial interviews with people from the band, so you really get a good picture of the band, along with these great performances. There's very famous performance of their song "The Weight" that Mavis Staples sings. That's just out of this world good. So that's another great concert film. And of course, Scorsese directed it, so that's a step above right there. And another one Scorsese did, about 15 years ago, was a Rolling Stones concert movie called Shine a Light, which was also actually really good. Had a lot of guest stars on that one too, and he did a really cool job with that. So that's another really good concert doc.
I'm really surprised that for 1978 you assigned me Days of Heaven instead of The Last Waltz. Although now I'm glad you've talked about it here, because we're not going to talk about it there.
Right, yeah, and that was a tough call too. Days of Heaven is a Malick movie, and I'm a super hardcore Terrence Malick fan too, so it's hard to turn down an opportunity to talk about Terrence Malick.
But only the old stuff, not so much the new stuff.
Yeah, there's some of the more recent ones are a little rough.
An interesting thing about going back to Stop Making Sense.
Mm-hmm.
I want to actually, I wrote it down because I go down these YouTube rabbit holes, and YouTube will sort of recommend to you stuff that it thinks you'll like. And in the days leading up to going to see Stop Making Sense, and we should say the reason that this episode is cutting the line. Mm-hmm. Last week we said we were going to do a different episode. This week, this is cutting the line because I just saw this in IMAX, and Jake, you're about to go see this, and it's about to be re-released wide. So we wanted to get it in while people still had a chance to get excited by this and then go see it. So I've been listening to a lot of Talking Heads in the days leading up to going to see, not just Talking Heads even, because I'm really into like David Byrne's collaboration with St. Vincent is really good. And I've listened to a lot of that. They recommended that I listen to a very random podcast. So I watched that on YouTube. The podcast is called Prodigious Slaps. It's hosted by a guy from the band Blaggerts, which I think they're a small band, that's like an Irish band. And he talked a little about the history of the album release of Stop Making Sense and how it got reissued in 1999. And a couple of things were changed, and they're still changed. Like the version I saw is from the reissue. That's what's put out. And the only significant change is during the Tom Tom Club song. Chris France, there's a line about cocaine in his he's doing like radio voice while his wife sings and plays the bass.
Mm-hmm.
And he says something about cocaine. And in the reissue, they changed it to be much more innocuous. It was like, instead of cocaine, it's like having fun in the rain. It's not fun, but it's something equally silly.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest is just like David Byrne going like, wah, instead of So I don't know why. It was just interesting to hear about all the changes that happened and how you really can't get the original anymore unless you find, one of these out of print vinyl albums of it.
Vinyl, yeah.
Yeah, because all streaming versions are the new version. Any new vinyl that comes out, any new CD that comes out, that's all going to be the new version.
Interesting. I had no idea. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about Stop Making Sense?
Not exactly stop making sense, but if we're still on concert films at the time that this episode comes out, we're actually a couple of weeks away from a big one because Taylor Swift, the Eras Tour, is a couple of weeks from coming out in theaters right on the heels of Stop Making Sense. It'll be interesting to see. That's another one that's going to be spliced together from a 3-show run, kind of just like Stop Making Sense was. And, big artist, big concert, big tour, and already has been a big movie. So interesting. I wonder if more concert films, if that'll start becoming more of a norm, if that'll be something, with the way Hollywood's going with the strike and everything else that's going on. If, maybe concert films will be something that, maybe becomes a little more popular again.
Yeah. Well, two interesting things about that. Well, actually many interesting things about that. One, it's set up to be the most profitable concert film of all time already.
Easily. Yeah.
Two, I'm annoyed because I have Regal Pass, and because the gimmick is that the tickets cost $19.89 because that's the year she was born, and she has an album called 1989. They're not doing Regal Pass for this movie. It's really annoying.
She's got to be special.
Three, the studios really screwed up. She shopped this to studios, and they wanted to like take huge cuts, and they wouldn't meet her financial needs. So she was like, screw it. And she just went straight to AMC and is distributing this herself because of course she can. She has one of the biggest social media followings of anyone ever. Why would she need a studio's marketing department to do this? Right. So it'd be interesting to see if there are other concert films that are like, why shouldn't Beyonce do some? Beyonce has already made a film like Lemonade. Mm-hmm. I really recommend anyone watch Lemonade. I think you have to watch it on Tidal. So I downloaded Tidal specifically to watch that. It's great. I have no doubt that Beyonce could do a concert film too. Her concerts are reportedly incredible.
Did a whole big run. Yeah, I saw a lot of it on Instagram. A lot of other people were going to stars and stuff. Yeah, it looked awesome.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's different genres where folks could do it too. And just like you were saying with The Last Waltz, it doesn't just have to be the concert. The interstitial stuff can be really interesting. I watched you had told me to maybe watch it. You weren't sure if I would like it. But I watched it because it's part of this thing called the Tanner Cinematic Universe. So Robert Altman made this TV show, Tanner 88, and it was really cool. It was a fake presidential primary run by a candidate named Tanner, where Michael Murphy plays a fake Democratic presidential candidate named Jack Tanner in the 1988 election. And like Bob Dole is in this movie, and all of the Democratic nominees for president are also in this. It's a TV show. And it was followed up by a 4-part HBO special called Tanner on Tanner. And the reason they did the special later was because Cynthia Nixon plays Tanner's daughter in the TV show. And she was like pretty much a kid when the TV show originally aired. And so she got famous on Sex and the City. And I think they wanted to HBO wanted to capitalize on that. So she, in Tanner on Tanner, it's her as a filmmaker, now an adult, interviewing her father and people about that election and things like that. But then Jack Tanner, the character, appears in Rolling Thunder Review, the Bob Dylan concert or a tour movie, which has a lot of fake interviews in them. Like Sharon Stone plays herself, but everything she says is not true.
Right.
And Jack Tanner is Michael Murphy. It's not, there is no Jack Tanner,
right.
But he talks about how like this concert tour affected his political career. So that's cool. You could do stuff like that too. Although you can't, the writer's strike will not allow for that because that's a scripted movie.
Right.
But there's a lot of interesting things you can do with stuff like this.
Yeah. It's just a lot of interesting avenues you can take and be creative with. It doesn't just have to be like, hey, here's a concert, right. Have fun. Yeah.
That said, I'm very glad that Stop Making Sense was just the concert because what a concert. It was loud, man. There were many times where I was like, I wish I had earplugs. It's crazy how loud this is. And then it made me wonder, I thought about you, of course, because you have hearing issues.
Yes.
I thought about Jake wears hearing aids.
Yes.
And as people get older, their hearing fades. But why is it that as my hearing gets older, as I get older and my hearing fades, also sound irritates me more?
That's a good question.
And that's just it. That's just life. Like everyone's just like, oh, it's too loud. Like, anyway. I love this movie. I gave it 4.5 stars.
Yeah, it's a 5 for me. I've probably seen it probably 5 or 6 times over the years, and it's just a joy. You see a smile all the way through it. You chair dance or you couch dance while you're watching. I mean, it's hard not to move to. All the great songs are there. Once in a lifetime. This is the place. Psycho Killer. Everything's there. It's a delight. Yeah, and if you can see it on an IMAX or see it on a big screen, I know it's kind of rolling out wide, but probably not in like every small town. So I don't know if you get a chance to see it. Certainly well worth your time.
Oh, one last question. You said this is the 40th anniversary. It's been 39 years. What's the deal?
Well, I think I think it debuted. I think because it debuted maybe at like one of the film festivals in 1983 or something. So I think that's what they're going with, and it didn't release actually until early 1984.
Okay, thank you for that. Because I was like, at first I was like, is it because they're being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? No, that happened, but it happened 21 years ago. So very strange. Anyway, that stopped making sense. I assigned you Once Upon a Time in America.
You sure did, and I'm glad you did actually, because it's one I had never seen.
I think this is a forgotten movie.
It feels like it, yeah.
No one talks about this movie, and it's not like this is a minor film. Like, this is a huge performance from De Niro. This is Sergio Leone's last movie. That's big.
Right.
It's got a great James Lipton performance, which I'm sure we're reluctant to say, but can't deny it.
Can't deny it.
And it's a reunion of Pesci and De Niro.
Sort of.
Reunion. I mean, it came out right.
Sort of. Well, it came out after Raging Bull, so.
Came out after Raging Bull, right. I was going to say it was before Goodfellas, but yeah, after Raging Bull.
Yep.
Which, super hot take. I don't care for that movie that much.
My friend Jeff, another listener of the podcast, I'm dropping both their names today. My friend Jeff Richardson, also Raging Bull, he thinks is lesser Scorsese.
Yeah, for one thing, I just don't find it as compelling as a lot of his movies. And for another, it's just hard to watch a guy do domestic abuse for 2 hours.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just shocked. But the reason that people don't talk about this movie, and the reason that people don't see this movie, it's 4 hours long.
Right. A full 4 hours. And right. I don't know, is there still any confusion over the versions? I mean, the 4-hour version was made pretty widely available, wasn't it? Because, I mean, the problem that this movie had when it came out is that the studio cut it up completely, cut it down by, I think they cut 90 minutes out of it, and even resequenced it, took the flashbacks out of order and put it in more of a chronological order, which completely messed with the flow of the movie.
Yeah, and it was not well reviewed because of that.
Gene Siskel at the time he said that the 4-hour cut was the best movie of the year, and the studio cut was the worst movie of the year. Yeah. And Ebert basically agreed with him, and most critics did.
Right. Now, I can't imagine calling this the best movie of the year for 1984, just because it is a struggle because of its length. It's hard. Yeah. Also because of its content. I mean, it's not a breeze. Leone is not known for making really accessible, fun movies. His movies are about hard men doing nasty stuff and then men reacting to that. And women tend to get the short shrift in all of his movies. And this movie's no different. So it's a tough one. I did not go back and watch the whole thing, but I did go back and watch big chunks of it. It's funny because when I signed it to you because I only watched it 2 years ago. And I remember at the time being like, wow, I can't believe more people haven't seen this movie. It's wild. For one thing, it's a Jewish story. De Niro does that sometimes. He plays a Jewish people. Yeah. Casino exists and this movie exists.
Yep.
And I don't think those are the only two. I think it's happened beyond that.
As far as I can tell, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think he plays a Jewish guy in King of Comedy, but that is a Jewish feeling movie, regardless.
I watched it fairly recently, and if he is, I mean, it's certainly not
It's not explicit. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
But Jerry Lewis is in that movie. So also, yeah, because it was a Jewish movie, I thought you should see it. And it just felt like, look, at this point, there's 6 Leone movies. You should see them all. I know there's a few you haven't seen, but you should see that. And I think this might be the only one that I've assigned to you because I had originally assigned you for a few dollars more and then I took it out. But maybe the good, the bad, and the ugly is on here.
I don't think I've seen any of those. Right. Or if I have, it's been so long that I don't think they're even marked on my Letterboxd as seen.
Wow. So he's never, in my opinion, he's never made a bad movie. They're all great, and this was his last one, and it was in his only American one, not his only one with American stars. Most of them had Clint Eastwood, but he made mostly Italian films. This is an American film, and it is very much like an immigrant story, a culture of New York, kind of New York story, and it's a multi-generational story, which I think is really interesting. You've got De Niro at 3 different points of his life, which is really great, as a kid, as a young person, and then as an old man. And it's not him as an old man pretending to be a young person, like in The Irishman. Yeah. You said you liked it. Tell me what you liked about it.
Yeah, I did. I liked it. It was a little tough to get through. It did take me a couple of nights to do it, just mostly for length, more than anything. But I liked the construction of it. I thought was really interesting. And knowing that like the studio had hacked it up, was like this. It wouldn't really be that interesting chronologically. It's a lot more interesting to see the older version of him, kind of reminiscing back to what his life had been, and why he was coming from where he was. He has to come back to his home as an old man. He has to go back to his home where all of these traumatic, trying to explain in a way that's not like sympathetic to him, because I'm not sympathetic to him at all. I mean, he makes a lot of horrible choices and does a lot of horrible things, and they're all basically his fault. So I'm not like sympathetic to him, but it's an interesting story to see how all of these events culminate in him having to come back and, basically reckon with all of these things that he's done. And man, he's just a horrible person. Really, all the yeah, bad guy, him and his three friends, they're all horrible. Like there's the one scene that just really kind of blew me away the most is when they're trying to get back at a police officer. And they switch his baby.
Oh my God. This is a crazy thing that happens in the movie.
I couldn't they switch his baby in the nursery and they switch around a whole bunch of other babies and they're all just basically like, oh well. And then they just carry on living their lives like it's nothing. And that, I don't know why it was that. I mean, there's a lot of horrible things. There's several rape scenes in this movie. There's a lot of horrible things there, but for some reason that was the scene that stuck out to me where I was like, that was like I had to turn it off. Like,
well, you realize this is like maybe not Depression era, but is it Depression era? It's got that vibe of like 1930s, 40s. There's no DNA testing going on. These people never found out who their kids were.
No, they would have no clue. Yeah.
Yeah. So that scene was wild, and it's played for laughs, which is really crazy.
Yeah.
And it's one of the better. It's a short scene. But Danny Aiello is so great as the cop in this scene. Like, holy crap. You also get great performances from Elizabeth McGovern. And she's really the most, I would say Deborah, her character Deborah, is probably the most sympathetic person in this movie.
Yeah.
She's sort of like, she grew up with them. She's played by Jennifer Connelly as a young person, right?
As young, yep. And she's like, she's a baby. She's like 13 or 14.
So here's another crazy thing about this movie. It's clearly not Jennifer Connelly, but someone stands in to play nude 14-year-old Jennifer Connelly.
Yeah.
Which is nuts. Like, there's some real troubling stuff watching this with 2023 brain.
Yeah.
She's great. Danny Aiello, like I said, is great. Burt Young has a nice little cameo. Joe Pesci has a nice little cameo.
Yeah, like there's such short. Like I was expecting Joe Pesci to be like in this movie, and he is not. He's in one scene, and it's really short.
Right, he's sixth billed. Ahead of him, it's just De Niro, Woods, Elizabeth McGovern, Treat Williams, Tuesday Weld, who plays this other like female who comes in and out of their lives and causes issues with the crew.
Yeah,
and then
she's very good too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she's terrific. And then
Treat Williams, he's not a factor until like the third act, really.
Right. But James Forsythe plays like one of the gang. He's quite good in it. He's good in it. I just realized he's Flat Top in Dick Tracy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Mandy Patinkin is in this movie.
Yep.
James Caan is in this movie.
Scott Caan's dad.
Scott. Oh, I'm so sorry for misnaming him. That was so rude of me.
Go back and edit that. Yeah.
No, I'm gonna leave it in. So do my mea culpa.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask you because you're the Oscar guy. I'm going to guess this got no Oscar attention.
None. Nothing. I think. The interesting thing is too is as with most of the only movies, the score was done by Ennio Morricone.
Mm-hmm.
The film's music was disqualified from Oscar consideration for a technicality, as the studio accidentally omitted the composer's name from the opening credits when trimming its running time for the American release. I had no idea that the name had to appear in the opening credits, but apparently that's a thing.
The title of the movie doesn't have to appear in the opening credits. You know how I learned that? Nolan doesn't like doing opening credits, so a lot of his movie titles only end up if they don't show up in the opening credits, they have to be in the end credits and they have to be the first thing. So you see, usually when a Nolan movie ends, it ends with boom, the title of the movie.
Oh, I never realized that.
Yeah.
I should have. I watched them all in a row, but
yeah. Oh, I don't. It's not all of them.
But yeah, no Oscar love, and I think that's probably because at the time a lot of people probably saw the cut up studio version, and it's not a good movie. So I can see why that would probably be the version that they saw.
For sure. And now, if you go looking for the movie streaming, the correct version is the one you'll find,
right?
Which, like we said, it's 4 hours long. So
yeah,
gear up.
But yeah, I mean, worth taking a look at. It's a bit of a tough hang, but it's pretty epic. Kind of big, historical, like I said, cross generational. Lots of it's big. It's a big movie. It's great performances. Yeah, and James Woods turned into a monster in the last decade or so, but he's got a great performance here.
Honestly, it's a real shame because he was a good actor, and now we don't get movies with him anymore. So it stinks.
Yep. Thanks, James.
All right, so before we go, let's real quick go through our top fives of 1984. In the 80s, we tend to bring it down to just five because as we go farther back, we haven't seen as many movies. All right, so my number five is Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind. It's a very early Miyazaki film. I don't love all the Miyazaki early stuff, but this one is really quite good. What's your number five?
My number five is the original Ghostbusters.
So that's my number two.
Oh, nice.
My number four is Stop Making Sense.
Which is great. I kind of would rank them a little bit differently because it's it's like a concert movie. I rank it differently, but yeah, I mean it's phenomenal, of course.
If I were to take Stop Making Sense out of my top five, then Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom becomes my number five.
Yep, that's good. Makes sense.
What's your number 4?
My number 4 would be This Is Spinal Tap.
That's a good one.
Yep.
I enjoy that film as well.
Yep.
I don't think I have it rated on Letterboxd. I don't think I've seen it.
It's weird. I don't have a star rating either, but I mean, it's one of my favorite movies ever. So
yeah. My number 3 is Blood Simple by the Coen brothers.
Okay. My number 3 is the Best Picture winner of that year, Amadeus.
I haven't seen that since high school when they showed it to us in high school, and I still don't understand why they showed it to us in high school. It's probably not that accurate to his life.
Yeah, I'm not sure how accurate it is. I'd have to look that up.
Also, is Mozart, like, do we need to know about him as a historical figure, or is it just okay that we hear his music?
That's another good question. Another good question for a different podcast, I think.
Absolutely, not for us. My number 2 is Ghostbusters, as I mentioned before.
My number 2 is an obscure Robert Altman film that I know you've also seen. It's called Secret Honor.
I have that in my top 15, I guess I would say. These are not organized really, but yeah, I do have it. That's, to me, that's sort of tied with Juzo Itami's The Funeral. We talked about Tom Popo recently. Mm-hmm. The Funeral is his first movie. So like those two I like about the same. They're kind of the same. Like Secret Honor it's cool. It's like Nixon in one room having a mental breakdown. That's the whole movie. And The Funeral,
Bill Baker Hall.
And The Funeral, the whole movie is like 3 days of just these people organizing and carrying out their father's funeral. It's pretty cool. My number 1 is The Neverending Story, the German-American fantasy that is it's just awesome. It's just like, if you're into fantasy at all and you haven't seen this movie, it's so good. But if you're an animal lover, there is a scene you might need to fast forward. What's your number 1? I
don't have that one on my Letterboxd. I probably just I haven't seen it since I was a kid. My number 1 then is one we've already mentioned, is Blood Simple.
Blood Simple. Great movie.
Absolutely love everything about that movie. M. Emmett Walsh.
You know, he's still alive.
Is he really? That's amazing.
He looks insane now. I mean, he's always looks like kind of gnarly, but like, yeah, he's still alive. I forget what I saw him in recently. Oh, he's in Knives Out. He has a very brief role in Knives Out, or maybe it's Glass. No, it's Knives Out, not Glass Onion.
That's right. Yeah. Now I remember that. Yeah.
Emmett Walsh, terrific. Danny Hedaya. What's not to love?
What's Frances McDormand, early Frances. I mean, right. Yeah, just a great movie.
Great movie. Well, that does it for 1984. We'll be back next week with whatever we promised you last week. I can't remember. I apologize. Thanks for sticking around. If you want to know what is coming out next week, go to our Letterboxd profile. You can find me at Brad Garoon on Letterboxd. I think, Jake, you're Jake Ziegler on Letterboxd.
Yep, it's Jake_Ziegler.
And both of us have pinned to our profiles our Never Did It podcast list. You could also just search for the Never Did It podcast list. And the 2 movies that will be discussed on next week's episode are always at the top of that list. So check that out. And thank you for joining us for Never Did It.